Imagine standing in a supermarket in the year 1700. No refrigeration, no out-of-season produce, no medicine in the back, just grain, salt, and luck.
Now imagine someone from that era walks into a modern pharmacy. They don't see a store. They see a miracle. Pills that stop infections, drugs that control blood pressure, vaccines that end diseases that once killed millions. But here's the strange part. We walk past that pharmacy every week without a second thought. We don't see a miracle. We see a line. That gap between what we have and how little we appreciate it is what this story is really about. Queen Anne of England was one of the most powerful women in the world. She had 18 pregnancies. Not a single one of her children survived into adulthood. Not one.
This wasn't unusual. This was life. Rich, poor, royalty, or peasant, death came for your children, and there was almost nothing you could do. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, wrote that it was not uncommon in the Scottish Highlands to meet a mother who had given birth to 20 children and had only 2 still alive. Let that number sit for a second. 20 pregnancies. 2 survivors. That was considered a normal life. And it wasn't just children. American President James Garfield died in 1881, not from his gunshot wound alone, but partly because the best doctors in the country didn't yet believe in germs. 2 weeks before Franklin Roosevelt died, his blood pressure was 260/150. His doctors could barely do a thing. Basic blood pressure medicine simply didn't exist yet. If you could bring one of those people forward in time and walk them through a modern grocery store, they would faint. Not from the food, from the sheer impossible abundance of it. 19 brands of jelly, fresh papaya in Minnesota in January, strawberries in December. But it wouldn't be the food that shocked them most. It would be the pharmacy in the back. To them, a pill that stops an infection would be pure magic. A shot that prevents a childhood disease would be a miracle from God Himself. And then they would watch you, sighing, checking your phone, frustrated at the wait. Their reaction wouldn't be admiration. It would be something closer to disgust. You have all of this, and you're complaining? They would think you were the most spoiled creature that had ever walked the earth, and in their terms, they would be right. Every generation works to build a better world for the next one. That's the whole point. You toil so your kids don't have to toil the same way. But then you watch those kids grow up, and something strange happens. You feel not pride, but disappointment. They don't suffer like you did. They don't even seem to notice. Wealthy families wrestle with this constantly. How do you give your children everything without making them into people who appreciate nothing? Whole societies have felt this. Every generation in recorded history has at some point looked at the younger generation and thought, they're lazy, they're entitled, they don't know how good they have it. And in a sense, they're always right. And in a sense, That's always been the entire point. There is a conversation that captures this perfectly. A man whose immigrant parents came to America and worked brutal, low-wage jobs just to stay afloat. Those parents sacrificed everything. They skipped vacations. They worked double shifts. They wore the same coat for 15 years, all so their children could have more. Now that son is a college-educated white-collar professional. He felt a strange guilt about it. His parents ground themselves down, and here he was, living what felt like an easy life. His worry: would his own kids learn the values of grit and frugality? When his daughter was young, all books came from the library. Now she asks for, and gets, $15 Taylor Swift books that pile up unread in her bedroom. He wondered if something was being lost. But here's the reframe that changes everything. If you sat down with those immigrant parents and asked them what they were working toward, what did they actually want? They would say exactly this: a granddaughter who gets to pick out a book at a store instead of waiting in line at a library. A family that doesn't have to worry about whether there's food this week. The granddaughter's apparent spoiledness isn't a failure. It's the success. It was the target the whole time. The goal of some parents is to work so hard that their children and grandchildren get to live lives that look spoiled by earlier standards. That apparent spoiling is proof that the mission was accomplished. Seen that way, the Taylor Swift book isn't a symbol of ingratitude. It's a trophy, a receipt, proof that the sacrifice paid off. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Spoiled is not an objective category. It's always a comparison. Spoiled compared to what? Compared to whom? You can look at your kids and think they're spoiled compared to how you grew up, but your grandparents could do the exact same thing to you. They worried about polio. They worried about scarlet fever. They watched neighbors die from things that today require nothing more than a single vaccination. And their grandparents? Their transportation was limited to horses. A bad harvest didn't mean a hard year. It meant losing children to starvation. That's not a metaphor. That was real life for billions of people. Every generation looks easier than the last. That's not a coincidence. That's the direction of human progress. But here's what people always miss. When one generation's problems get solved, life doesn't become objectively easy. You just move on to worrying about harder, higher-order problems. One generation worries about getting enough food. The next doesn't worry about food, but frets about physical security. The next has security, but now worries about disease. The next conquers disease and turns to education. The next gets education and starts worrying about work-life balance, about meaning, about mental health. The problems don't disappear. They evolve. They get more abstract, more psychological, more philosophical, because the foundational ones have finally been handled. That's not spoiledness. That's what it looks like when civilization works. John Adams, the second president of the United States, wrote something about this that has never stopped being true. He said, in essence, "I must study war and politics so that my children can have the freedom to study mathematics and science, so that their children can have the freedom to study art and philosophy." He understood that the whole point of hard sacrifice is to expand what the next generation gets to think about, to move their worries up the hierarchy of human needs. The fact that his grandchildren could afford to care about beauty instead of survival wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the entire justification for everything he had endured. Every generation that calls the next one soft is, in a way, paying itself a compliment. Because soft means safe. Soft means the danger was handled. Think about what you actually want for your kids or grandkids. Be honest. You want them to not get cancer, or if they do, to have treatments so advanced it barely slows them down. You want their jobs to be easier, their tools smarter, their commutes shorter. You want them to have energy so abundant they never think about it. You want the everyday frustrations you deal with today, the bureaucracy, the waiting, the friction, to just be gone. Is that spoiled? Maybe. By our current standards, yes. But by the standards of someone in 1900, or 1800, or 1200, you are already that spoiled child they could barely imagine. The only difference is the reference point. Change the comparison, and the meaning changes completely. You are the living result of thousands of years of human effort, sacrifice, and innovation stacked on top of each other. Every antibiotic you've ever taken exists because someone dedicated their life to a microscope in a lab. Every safe childbirth is built on the grief of generations who lost children and refused to accept it. The food in your refrigerator, the lights in your home, the clean water from your tap, these are not background noise. These are the accumulated victories of billions of people across centuries. You didn't build any of that. Neither did I. We are the beneficiaries. And that's not shameful. That's the whole point. The people who came before you didn't toil so that you would feel guilty about the world they built. They toiled so you wouldn't have to. So maybe the word spoiled is just the wrong frame entirely. A better word might be lucky, or fortunate, or, if you want the full version, a beneficiary of the accumulated hard work of everyone who came before you, left able to spend your days solving entirely new problems. Because that is what you are, and that what your children will be. And if everything goes right, that's what their children will be too. The chain keeps going. Each generation hands the next a slightly better world and a slightly more complex set of problems to worry about. The goal was never to make your kids struggle the same way you did. The goal was to make sure they never have to. And if you look around at the world today, at the medicine, the food, the technology, the knowledge available to any person with a phone, that goal has been achieved on a scale that no one in history could have predicted. You are the miracle that someone in 1700 would have prayed for. The only question is whether you ever stop long enough to notice.